So now let's go into some of the plugins that we're using. As far as pianos and electric pianos, the parts that I'm playing in the show are largely non-acoustic piano keyboard parts. And when I do play an acoustic piano part, I'm usually playing some kind of a stacked sound. Frequently I'll use either the stock grand piano on the motif that's the hardware. I'll fade that up, and sometimes I'll just use that. A lot of times I'll use either Sonic Synth by IK Multimedia, has some pretty decent piano sounds that I'll layer, or very recently I got a hold of the Air Expand 2, which has we actually have a piano stack here that I use a little bit. And here the Air Expand is really, it's essentially just a Rompler sample-based plugin, and here I have 3 different piano presets layered within the plugin. The other sounds that I use, the sounds that I rely on the most throughout the show, though, are going to be the Kontakt libraries from the Scarbee Vintage Keys collection. Most notably the Scarbee Rhodes and the Wurlitzer. Here's the Rhodes and here's the Wurlitzer. And I use these constantly throughout the session. And here's the Rhodes. And here's the Wurlitzer. I also like the Scarbee clavinet, which I honestly don't use this in the show, but I have it pulled up just in case something were to come up and we need clavinet for whatever reason. So between those 3 or 4 sounds, that covers most of the electric piano and acoustic piano duties that I would ever be called on to perform. As far as organs go, again, I'm sticking with the Vintage Organs Kontakt library, which is essentially the Native Instruments rehashing of the B4, which is what I was using until they discontinued it. And I'm not staying too busy with the Hammond work in this show. It operates largely as a pad, so not a lot of fancy footwork going on. I do also use the Arturia Vox V, which is a lot of fun. It sounds like this, and I use this on Crocodile Rock. Nice shrill Vox Continental sound. And that's about it where the organs are concerned. I do also double. I have a layer for Benny and the Jets where I use the vintage organs and the Vox together to get that Woody Woodpecker sound. So I feel like having both of those layered together has a nice little psychedelic type of effect. For horns and strings, the synth pad I use for much of the show is the EXS24, which is it's the stock sampler within Logic. So I use that a good bit as well. So here's the horns. I usually put a little bit of reverb, which I have we can just pull it up right here. Again, this is triggering that aux send that I showed you earlier, but pretty decent sounding horns, especially when you get it into a rock and roll mix. Here's the EXS string sound. Sounds like that. Now I use some other sounds too, as far as horns. Let's see here. We also have the Expand has a pretty decent orchestral horn preset. A bit bigger sounding, a little more reverb. And of course it's layered, and we've got a little bit of synth brass and some woodwinds and some things like that. And I also have an instance of the Air Expand for another string section here, and it's, of course, it's layered as well. So some other sounds that we're using too, though, is actually I have a better horn library, the Native Instruments session horns, which I actually like a good bit, and it sounds like this. So I'll use that for more of the kind of rock band horn section sort of sound, as opposed to the more orchestral sound. Actually, most of the time I'm doubling horn lines with our saxophone player just to give it more of a fuller sound. As far as some of the synths go, let's moving on. Some of the synths that we have going on are, I should say that the Piano Men show is not real heavy on too many synth sounds. From something that sounds like an actual synthesizer, these are all sounds that are trying to sound like other things. But I do have, again, going back to the Oberheim sound, I do have the Arturia Oberheim SEM synth that I like a lot, and it's really just I'm just using it as a kind of this brassy sounding. The only place I use this in the show is on Rocket Man. There's some subtle synth pads happening on that song. The only other synth sounds that I'm using are two Mini Moog emulators, and one is the Native Instruments Reaktor instrument Monark, which is an outstanding Mini Moog emulator, and it sounds like this. Place where I really use that for a specific part in the show is, again, back on Benny and the Jets, where we're playing that I call it the Woody the Woodpecker theme, and what I do is I play a call and response line between the organs and the synthesizer, so it sounds a little bit like this. Really, the only one in the show noticing that is me. That's the way it works. So the other synth that I'm using is another Arturia synth, and it's the Arturia Mini V, which again is an outstanding synthesizer. I don't think I use this at all during the show, but it sounds like this. That's about it for real heavy-duty synth sounds.